Hello and welcome to Airheads, a not-so-serious look at the serious business of royal rumours, gossip and gowns. I'm Tom.
And I'm Maeve.
And we are back after a little bit of a break to talk about the big news from the last week, which is all about the fallout from Lord Dyson's report into the Martin Bashir Panorama interview with Diana in 1995.
Yes. Last week, an official BBC inquiry found that Bashir had used deceitful methods to secure his interview with Princess Diana. The report states that he breached the BBC's editorial guidelines by creating 2 false bank statements to improperly manipulate Diana into giving the interview. These fake bank statements were shown to Diana's brother, Charles Spencer, and they suggested people were being paid to keep Diana under surveillance.
And the inquiry also alleges that senior BBC executives covered it all up as well. So, Richard Eyre, who was the BBC's controller of editorial policy in 1995, told The Telegraph that the use of deceit in making factual programmes would have been permissible only in the case of investigating serious crime, and where evidence of the guilt of that person being investigated had already been obtained. Those circumstances clearly don't apply to an interview with the Princess of Wales. It would not have been acceptable to use significant deceit in this case.
Yeah, and following his investigation, Lord Dyson, the guy who compiled the report, said he's satisfied that Bashir commissioned fake bank statements and showed them to Charles Spencer, Diana's brother. Bashir also flourished statements of Princess Diana's private secretary Patrick Jeffson and Prince Charles's private secretary Richard Aylard, which contained information that had probably been fabricated by Mr. Bashir. He did this to deceive and induce Charles Spencer to gain his trust and arrange a meeting with the princess. In doing so, he was able to convince Diana to do the notorious interview.
He had added in this report that Diana probably would have agreed to an interview with the current royal correspondent Nick Witchell or a BBC journalist of similar experience and reputation, as she was, as he says, keen on the idea.
Yeah, so I don't think there's any question that Diana had wanted to do an interview. No one is suggesting that it was these documents that sort of drove her to talk in the first place. And Martin Bashir produced a handwritten note, you guys have probably seen it, from Diana saying that she hadn't been shown any documents and had no regrets about doing the interview. The problem is that this was undoubtedly a breach of journalistic integrity. It is a huge stain on the BBC.
Yeah.
And that means that what Diana has said is now being called into question.
To me, it seemed kind of like a bit in a detective show where, you know, they get the evidence, but they can't use it in court because they had the wrong warrant or they didn't have a warrant at all. And so we're all watching going, we know that person is guilty, but we can't use the evidence.
I think it just means that a lot of people are now questioning the legitimacy of what she said, so that there is this sort of shadow over what previously was seen as this sort of cathartic interview for her.
Yeah, and I don't think that has really been helped by Will's statement. Both Prince William and Prince Harry have made statements following the findings of this investigation, and Will's was to camera, which I presume is to get better news coverage.
Yeah, as long as there was an accompanying image, then it was more likely to get on the front pages and stuff like that. I did find that very unusual that he recorded this to camera. But he started by thanking Lord Dyson and his team. He mentioned some of the findings from the report, that BBC employees lied and used fake documents to obtain the interview with my mother, made lurid and false claims about the royal family which played on her fears and fueled paranoia, displayed woeful incompetence when investigating complaints and concerns about the programme, and were evasive in their reporting to the media and covered up what they knew from their internal investigation.
You guys have probably watched the statement from Will, and it's quite long, so we're not going to read out the whole thing, but it's just full of very pinpointed attacks on the BBC specifically about the deceitful way the interview was obtained, saying that the BBC's failures contributed significantly to her fear and paranoia and isolation that he remembers from those final years.
And that the way the interview was obtained influenced what Diana said in his view. He also said that it's his view that this Panorama program holds no legitimacy and should never be aired again. It effectively established a false narrative which for over a quarter of a century has been commercialised by the BBC and others. And in an era of fake news, public service broadcasting and a free press have never been more important. These failings, identified by investigative journalists, not only let my mother down and my family down, they let the public down too. It's sort of hard to talk about this because, of course, Will and Harry are entitled to react in whatever way they want. It's their mother. But Will's statement really raises concerns for me. I think in likening the interview to fake news and calling it a false narrative and demanding that it never be aired again, he is discrediting what Diana said in that interview and suggesting she wasn't in control of what she was saying or able to make her own decisions. And in a way, that echoes to me some of the things that Diana spoke about in that interview when she talked about the perception of her as being silly and unstable, and it's sort of reinforcing that image of her as not being in charge of her own faculties as a way of basically denying her agency and delegitimizing the more controversial or unpalatable things that she said and did.
No, I totally agree. And I felt like in the interview, when she's talking about that view of herself, you're really getting this glimpse of like the real Diana as being someone who, you know, knows what she's doing and who knows what she wants to say. And, you know, from what we've heard, she was shopping around for an interview in which to say these things. So I felt really uncomfortable with the way Will put that. And yeah, I did find this just so hard to know how to respond to it. Like, it's such a scathing attack on the BBC. It's very targeted specifically at them. And, well, you know, we obviously should acknowledge that Will and Harry will have an unparalleled insight into those last few years with Diana, you know, when they talk about her paranoia and things. We should take that seriously. But I do think this also seems to be coming from an angle that's trying to get Charles off the hook for any role that he might have played in the deterioration of her mental health, her eating disorders, and the breakdown of their marriage. You know, the BBC didn't make him have an affair. And I think we need to take very seriously everything that Diana said in that interview regardless.
Yeah, I would say as well, like, not just letting Charles off the hook, but letting the monarchy off the hook.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't say Charles is 100% exclusively to blame for all of those things. Mm-hmm. I think the royal family or the monarchy as an institution definitely played a role.
Yeah, no, I agree. I do think there's a point in the interview where Martha Bashir asks whether she felt that there was hostility towards her from within the household. And I do think that that part of the interview is one that probably needs reevaluation in light of what has happened, because if she was led to believe that, you know, people in the household were being paid to surveil her or whatever it is, then, you know, of course that has the possibility to colour her answers there. But personally, I don't feel like we need to take her comments about the members of the family and about Charles and, you know, her very personal revelations about her experience as, like, delegitimized or neutralized by this. But it wasn't just Will. Harry released a statement as well. His was a written one. He said, "Our mother was an incredible woman who dedicated her life to service. She was resilient, brave, and unquestionably honest. The ripple effect of a culture of exploitation and unethical practices ultimately took her life. To those who have taken some form of accountability, thank you for owning it. That is the first step towards justice and truth." I really felt the influence of either Meghan or just being in California in this line, like owning your truth.
He went on, "What deeply concerns me is the practices like these, and even worse, are still widespread today. Then and now, it's bigger than one outlet, one network, or one publication. Our mother lost her life because of this, and nothing has changed. By protecting her legacy, we protect everyone and uphold the dignity with which she lived her life. Let's remember who she was and what she stood for." Very Harry there.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, like you were saying, Will's statement was very much targeted at the BBC, whereas Harry's levelling his statement at the media more broadly.
Exactly what we'd expect from him, I think.
Yeah, of course. And, there is something that makes me uncomfortable about this, particularly when you see the kind of moralizing from the tabloids about this report and everything to do with the Bashir interview, and as well from the British government when you see Boris Johnson or other Conservative MPs talking about this. At times it seems to me that they are weaponizing this incident as a way of calling for the BBC to be defunded.
Yeah.
And I'd just add as well that it's all men talking about a woman. And, even if they are her sons, there's also the newspaper editors, the politicians, the columnists. They all tend to be men talking about this and talking about Diana in a way that really denies her any kind of agency, that makes me very uncomfortable. And as well as that, I obviously don't want to defund the BBC, and neither do you.
No, absolutely. We did actually take this opportunity to watch the full Panorama interview, because we'd only seen kind of clips of it up until now.
Yeah, even though we had said we were going to do this before, and loads of our listeners were like, don't do it. That's so boring. It was not boring, and I hope this conversation is not boring. But I thought we could talk a little bit about some of the things that we noticed while watching it, because what struck me straight away was that they just get right into it. There is no sort of ice breaking. His first words are, "Your Royal Highness, how prepared were you for the pressures that came with marrying into the royal family?"
Yeah, there's no
warm up. There's just immediately into the questions.
And obviously we're comparing it quite a lot to the Oprah interview, especially when it's just Oprah and Meghan. And the style of that interview is so conversational, and it's such a rapport, a back and forth and kind of cutting in. And the style of this couldn't be more different. This was exam question, answer. And I mean, Diana obviously wants to talk, and she has her answers. And also what I found really striking is she knows when she's finished giving her answer. She just stops talking and gives those eyes.
Yeah, the way you were talking about it there makes it sound like it's going to be really abrupt and stilted. But Diana is very clear in what she wants to say, and she does seem quite comfortable in speaking, and as well as that, she's incredibly candid. It seemed like nothing was off limits here. Like you say, she has some clear boundaries about how much she's willing to say, but she talks in detail about self-harming, about bulimia, about the impact of Charles's affair with Camilla on her, which she says was pretty devastating, rampant bulimia, if you can have rampant bulimia, and just a feeling of being no good at anything and being useless and hopeless and failed in every direction.
So sad.
Yeah, you really just feel so much for her, and you can really tell why this was so shocking at the time. I mean, obviously we've seen the clips of there were three of us in the marriage and all that kind of stuff, but how frank she was about what it felt like to endure that really intense public scrutiny and the media attention, and Charles's jealousy and how unprepared or unsupported she was by the institution. She says, "No one sat me down with a piece of paper and said this is what is expected of you."
Yeah, and you can't really help but think about what we've heard about Meghan joining the royal family as well, and how she was saying that, she was learning the national anthem in her spare time and the hymns and things like that. But I think what really struck me when she was talking about Charles and his inability to cope with her popularity and things was there really wasn't a hint of anger. Maybe she'd worked through all that by this point or whatever it was, but there was no anger or bitterness, and she really made a point of expressing her understanding of him and how the situation that they found themselves in would have been a difficult one for someone like him to deal with, or someone with his background to deal with, which I thought was very gracious. And, for all that she's very candid and there's no holds barred, she does seem to show some kind of consideration for the important people in her life, even if she feels, or we feel, that they slighted her.
Yeah. And, she does talk around it a little bit when she is asked about her depression, and she says, "It gave everybody a wonderful new label. Diana's unstable and Diana's mentally unbalanced, and unfortunately that seems to have stuck on and off over the years." And she sort of attributes that to Charles's friends rather than Charles himself.
Yeah.
And as well as that, she talks about the perception of her as being stupid. And we've talked about it before, and I think everybody kind of heard of that quote where she famously said she was thick as a plank. And she says, "I made the grave mistake once of saying to a child I was thick as a plank in order to ease the child's nervousness, which it did. But that headline went all over the world, and I rather regret saying it."
Yeah. The image craft that goes into her job and her experience, like, all comes out in this interview, and it's fascinating. But I thought her talking about mental health and eating disorders just felt, I don't know for sure whether it was like how ahead of its time it was to be speaking so frankly, but I feel like even someone speaking now on such a public stage in this kind of personal detail is incredibly powerful still. So I was really moved by what she said, watching it even, 25 years later.
Yeah, and her gaze is so intense.
I know, yeah.
Also, she looks and speaks so much like Will in this. To me, I couldn't get over it.
Yeah, the version we were watching was very fuzzy. But yeah, all you had to do was squint a little bit and it was Will in drag.
Speaking of Will, let's talk about the Cambridges.
Yes, that was the other big story of the week, which was their royal tour of Scotland, where they were cosplaying as the Earl and Countess of Strathearn.
This comes right after an election in Scotland that saw Nicola Sturgeon re-elected as First Minister and renewing her calls for another referendum on Scottish independence. The polls are much more in her favour than they were last time in 2014.
And according to the Daily Mail, officials at Number 10 have held discussions about how to emphasise cultural bonds, with the royal family seen as one of the most powerful weapons in the armoury. And I suppose they can be a pretty powerful weapon because, remember when the Queen intervened in the last referendum in 2014? She told people to think carefully about the future. But I do kind of wonder what the impact will be on the numbers from this Cambridge tour.
I mean, that was definitely the purpose of this tour.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
The tour comprised of a seemingly endless stream of events. It was very hard to follow. They packed so much into this.
A true charm offensive, as it is constantly being described.
Yes.
But some of the highlights, well, let's just quickly do what Will did before Kate got there. He did some football stuff and did some special racing in a special racing car, and then went and flirted with some people in a care home. So he was living his blokiest fantasy, I think.
Do blokes fantasize about flirting in care homes?
All blokes, yeah. But then Kate joined him, and they met with Turning Point Scotland and the Scottish Violence Reduction Unit, who tackle issues around addiction and violence. And some of their methods include using loud music as a deterrent. And Kate had a go.
More great Kate DJing footage.
Oh, so good. We'd only just been talking about their tour of Australia and New Zealand back in 2014, and the great footage of Will and Kate DJing at that.
Kate on the decks.
Love it.
Her second home.
They also joined Sikh Sanjog, which is a group fighting food poverty in Edinburgh. They helped them prepare a meal for one of their youth groups. And just in general, they did so many events with kids on this tour, which I guess is very much in their wheelhouse, or at least very much in Kate's wheelhouse. Including this tennis match between Team Duke and Team Duchess with children from Canal View Primary School. Will's team won, which I'm sure Kate was furious about. But we did get this great photo of her doing a fist bump with one of the kids.
That is great. And they hosted an outdoor screening of Cruella, the new Disney movie, at Holyrood Palace for NHS staff. And Will and Kate arrived in Prince Philip's Land Rover.
Not the one that carried the coffin. That was your first question.
Well, it looks almost exactly the same. And the Kensington Royal at the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge on Instagram shared a video interview that entertainment journalists Will and Kate did with Emma Stone and Emma Thompson, the stars of the film, in which Emma Thompson says to Will, "Nice to see you, darling."
So funny. What a way to greet him. People were really obsessed with Will and Kate going back to St Andrews University, though.
That was smart.
Yeah, it made a lot of sense because they went back to where they first met. It's university. They visited their old residence halls and kind of stuff like that. And they also did some land yachting.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but it really tapped into people's sort of desire for nostalgia, reminded everyone of their early courtship.
Yeah. Especially as they were spotted leaving a restaurant called Forgan's after what everyone has dubbed date night.
I did think it was interesting that when they went to St Andrews, Kate wore quite a Meganish outfit. She wore Veja trainers, which I know everyone on earth wears Veja trainers, but
Meghan was an early adopter.
And these sort of cropped trousers that looked very Meganish as well, I thought. But it did remind people of when they first met, and as well as that, when they did the land yachting, that was the sort of sporty, competitive side of them that people really like.
Yeah.
So I did think it was a very savvy bit of scheduling. There was one meeting, however, that was not publicised.
This was amazing. So according to Channel 4, Will reportedly hosted a secret meeting with former Prime Minister Gordon Brown at Holyrood Palace in Edinburgh, where they reportedly discussed Scottish independence.
And Gordon Brown has been very open about his views on Scottish independence. He is very pro-union. He recently announced he's launched a campaigning movement to save the union.
And is clearly recruiting Will for the cause. I don't think he needs much recruiting.
Yeah.
He's kind of basically born to save the union, I think, in his own mind. But Channel 4 News reported how Kensington Palace confirmed the meeting took place and that Will was listening to community views on the issue of independence. As though Will's like having a town hall meeting with like everyone. No, he's like meeting one person who has a campaign to save the union. That's not really... Wouldn't seem to me to be listening to community views. That seems like a very generous way of describing it.
Well, a spokesperson for Kensington Palace said, during his time in Scotland, Prince William has spoken to a broad range of people from different communities, including politicians from across the political spectrum. But aside from Nicola Sturgeon, I don't think there were that many other politicians on this trip.
Yeah, and an SNP source also apparently told Channel 4 that the Duke's secret meeting with Gordon Brown would appear to be evidence of coordination between the Unionist campaign and the royal family. So,
I'm sure people will say, oh, the SNP would say that, but also, are they wrong?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, every royal tour is about trying to increase the popularity and relevance of the royals and, by extension, the British government. But for me, seeing it so blatantly linked to this issue of Scottish independence is so heavy-handed.
I mean, to me, it is already blatantly linked to the issue of Scottish independence. Yeah. I think what's most surprising to me is the clear attempt to hide this meeting. Because Christian Gurumurthy, the Channel 4 reporter, tweeted that the meeting was so sensitive, Channel 4 News was prevented from airing footage shot from outside the palace gates. Kensington Palace have said we were stopped from airing the footage we filmed of Mr. Brown in the grounds of Holyrood Palace, not because of sensitivities, but because they claim Channel 4 News was trespassing. Our team were in a public place outside the gates.
So when actually you have Will issuing a statement where he talks about how freedom of press is incredibly important right now, this seems to be a case of the royals trying to censor the free press. Right? That's what it seems like.
Yeah, it definitely seems like a contradiction of that very flashy to camera statement he released just a few days before. But this meeting was later mentioned in the court circular, which details all the official engagements undertaken by the royals, so it ended up being not so secret.
Yeah.
But I still think that incident of Channel 4 allegedly being prevented from airing footage is notable.
Yeah, I totally agree.
To wrap up this tour, though, Will and Kate sent a thank you note that read, "To the people, communities and organisations we visited and heard from, and those who stopped to wave and make our return to Scotland so special, thank you, William and Catherine."
Yeah, this was a fully printed message. There was no signature or anything. None of it was hand done. But on the other side of the postcard, we saw an original drawing by Kate Middleton.
Amazing.
It showed a sketch of St Andrews that she did back in 2002.
Tom, you're the artist. What is your review of this artwork?
I thought it was fine. Yeah. I thought it was not as good, actually, as the picture of a church that she did for Pippa Middleton's order of service for her wedding.
Well, she did that 15 years later.
That's true, yeah. Maybe she definitely did get a lot better.
And she'll continue to get better, I'm sure. I look forward to seeing her next work of art.
Yeah, I would have liked if she'd done a current piece, but I suppose we have that to look forward to.
That's what we'll get on the eve of the referendum.
It wasn't all Cambridge news. We also got an update on Harry and Meghan's charitable foundation. You might remember that before Archwell, there was Sussex Royal, which was Harry and Meghan's vehicle for charitable endeavours. And when they stepped back as senior working royals, there was some controversy over the transfer of funds from that foundation to Travelist, which is Harry's sustainable travel initiative.
Yeah, and the legality of this transfer was called into question by Republic, the anti-monarchist group over here in the UK. We talk about a lot. And this week, as the Royal Reporter Omid Scobie tweeted, Britain's Charity Commission has announced the conclusion to its almost one-year review into MWX Foundation, formerly the Sussex Foundation, and the Royal Foundation, confirming that the charities did not act outside charity law in transferring funds to Travelist.
And Republic issued a full apology, admitting they had not done their due diligence in terms of backing up their questions about the transfer. Like, we talk about Republic a lot, like you said, and I think they do some really, really good work. And I think we should be really clear here that they scrutinise and call into question every single member of the royal family.
Yeah, they don't miss a lot.
Yeah. I think when this was kind of called into question at the time, we said we felt it was unlikely to be unlawful, but that all millionaires and billionaires should have their transactions scrutinised, even or perhaps especially their philanthropic work. So it is important to pay attention to these things and to ask the right questions. But I do think what's bad is how eagerly this was covered versus other financial stories regarding members of the royal family, which do not get the same kind of like almost gleeful take up from the rest of the press.
Yeah, nothing illegal happened in this instance, but that's not to say that other members of the royal family and other instances of financial funny business haven't occurred or aren't worthy of scrutiny.
Yeah, and we should be paying attention to all of it and asking the right questions. But I did think another kind of aspect of this story was that Harry and Meghan are formally shutting down MWX Trading, formerly Sussex Foundation, which I think is quite sad for Britain because they are proving to be like very major players on the fundraising circuit. I do kind of hope that they'll keep sending money back to UK charities to show up the rest of the royals.
But again, it's another sign that they are 100% focused on the US now.
Yeah.
And they don't feel the need to have a foothold in the UK anymore.
Yeah.
In terms of their fundraising, at least. Let's move on to quote of the week. We've got two zingers.
So the first one comes from a visit by Charles and Camilla to the Prince of Wales pub in Clapham Old Town in South London. As he arrived, Charles said, "I've always thought it'd be rather fun to go around visiting every Prince of Wales in the country. Hopefully I get a free drink in each one."
In case people don't know, there's like a Prince of Wales pub basically on every corner in the UK.
It's one of the most common pub names.
And I honestly think if Charles and Camilla were to do a tour of every Prince of Wales pub in the UK, it would be a huge hit.
Yeah. Imagine that could finally get their popularity back on track.
Yeah, if they just went on like a pisshead tour, a pub crawl across the UK, people, namely you and I, would love it.
Yeah, I might become a monarchist. While they were at the pub, they obviously didn't miss a chance to pull a couple of pints. I'm sure Camilla's really good at it. But Charles said, "Bit difficult this," as he went to drink his pint because he'd forgotten to take his mask off.
Absolutely amazing pictures.
Really, really good. And Camilla said, "That's going to be an interesting one, to drink through a mask." Oh, Camilla, drinking's the only time the mask comes off.
But Charles and Camilla back pulling pints in random pubs around the UK. This is like nature is healing type thing, right?
Yeah, I think we can finally see the light at the end of the tunnel.
My quote of the week came during a walkabout in Scotland in Stromness, when Kate and Will were walking around and a little boy asked Kate, "Are you a prince?" And she said, "I'm not a prince. I'm the Duchess of Cambridge." I wish we could include the audio here because Tom and I had tears in our eyes watching this, but it's just too noisy. I don't think you'll be able to hear it. But you should look it up because it is really something.
It's so funny. Oh my God.
Kate, though, also packed in a lot of looks on this Scotland tour.
Many of them blue.
Exactly. We thought we could talk through some of our favourites as our fit for a queen. Tom, what was your number one favourite?
Okay, well, I'm a real sap and a bit basic, but my favourite was the pink.
The pretty pink princess dress.
Yeah, exactly. So this was a pink silk shirt dress by Me and M. It has really nice pleats down the front. It has an asymmetrical hem. I think it's just a genuinely very nice dress. But she wore it to meet Mila Snedden, who's a 5-year-old cancer survivor who was the subject of one of the photographs from the Hold Still competition. And Kate recently revealed a telephone call she had with Mila and her mum, Linda, on their new YouTube channel. And over the course of that conversation, she promised to wear a pink dress when she met Mila because that's Mila's favourite colour. But I thought that was really lovely.
Yeah, that was so sweet. The little girl looked so delighted. And it was just such a nice moment. I personally didn't love the dress. I didn't think that colour was particularly good on Kate. But I do love the story.
What I also found funny was somebody asked Mila later what she talked about with Kate, and she said that she was mainly busy drawing a picture of a robot. But there were lots of other good looks on this tour. What were your favourites?
I find it hard to pick a favourite because there were little issues I had with all of them.
Okay.
Like, I did find that first outfit, the electric blue blazer with the skirt, very striking. But I wasn't crazy about the tan accessories with it. And I also really wasn't crazy about the Diana cosplay element of it. Yeah. We've talked about this so many times, but I just find it a little bit unsettling that Kate is walking around with Will dressed up as the ghost of his dead mother. Yeah,
I find that very difficult to get my head around.
And I just don't understand why people are so obsessed with her doing this as well. Like, the odd time I can see why it would be sort of poignant tribute, but it just happens so much. And as well as that, the blue being a very direct nod to the Scottish flag was a little bit heavy-handed, classically heavy-handed for Kate.
Yeah, I was going to say, what do you expect? She loves flag dressing.
I did enjoy as well that long checked coat by Holland Cooper that she wore to the film screening, which had the glittery gold skirt underneath.
And the 14 buttons.
Yeah, but so many buttons, and also the coat was so long.
Yeah. I mean, it was a nice check, but personally I found the number of buttons and the cut of it just too cartoonish, which maybe is appropriate for the film that we were going to watch.
It was a strange choice for a film. I think probably the strongest, the most effective looks for me were the more kind of day wear ones, particularly the blazers with the blouses and the trousers, like the green Massimo Dutti blazer with the polka dot blouse, which is probably from Jigsaw, and the crop trousers with the white Supergas. I just really like that it's now become the sort of standard daytime uniform for Kate to wear these trousers and blouses outfits instead of the coat dresses.
Yeah.
There was one coat dress, the very last outfit that she wore was a fucking new blue Catherine Walker coat dress, as if she needs another new one of those, which had a very wide open neckline that just looked sort of unbalanced. The proportions didn't really work for me as a coat dress, but that just looked like so old fashioned compared to the other stuff she wore on this tour that looked quite modern and in keeping with the sort of Kate we're now used to over the last few years.
Yeah, and they seem to fit a lot more with the kind of current narrative for Kate, of someone who will, like, you know, talk to kids, help them plant seeds, like, then go off and meet, like, the head of some charity or whatever, like, much more, like you say, workwear than the coat dresses, which just seem like so impractical and uncomfortable to me.
Yeah, and she did wear a few Scottish brands on this tour as well, which was nice, rather than just cosplaying the flag, as she did in Ireland, for example. She had some nice knitwear from Brora. That was lovely. And I think she had one of the blouses was from Brora as well. And there was a few other designers too. But I thought that was a good show of sartorial diplomacy from Kate.
Mm-hmm. And I think for all of these reasons, she makes first in line.
I would agree. I think this tour was, on the whole, very successful. I think it played to Kate's strengths in terms of doing a lot of stuff with kids. And as well, I thought her wardrobe was very strong, even though I had a lot of quibbles with it. I think she looked very comfortable. And there were moments like that dress that you mentioned, the pink dress that had a sweet story behind them. So all of that stuff really worked for me. But as well as that, aside from the tour, she posted a photo this weekend of Kate getting vaccinated at the Science Museum on Friday in a very dressed down look. These sort of vintagey mom jeans and a ribbed knitted top, which was so unusual to see her in such a casual look. But, you know, just in general, I love, and you love, any public figures documenting their vaccines.
Yeah, I love that. And I think hers was a lot less obnoxious than Will's. I mean, she wore fucking short sleeves like a normal person to go and get the vaccine. Like Will in his long sleeve shirt, rolling it all the way up.
Long sleeve shirt and long sleeve jumper? What was going on there?
I think it was so that when you roll it right up, it's really tight at the top, which means it traps the blood in your arm, which means it kind of looks even more pumped than he actually is.
And you were getting pumped over it, were you, Tom?
Well, there he was.
You were pumping away.
He was all...
Sorry, you got that.
I'm not cutting that. But yeah, he was also, you know, arms out for a vaccine and joined the ranks.
I had to tell Tom what that word meant last week.
And now I use it all the time. But yeah, he's joined the ranks of other British vaccine pin-ups like Ricky Gervais, Andrew Lloyd Webber and Hugh Bonneville.
I haven't seen any of those. I was thinking about the Greek Prime Minister who did his sexy selfie getting vaccinated. But I just thought this was possibly one of the funniest things Will has ever done, in my opinion. As soon as I saw it, my eyes rolled out of my head. Like, I just couldn't believe how self-satisfied he was, that he was clearly flexing as if his life depended on it, and just really feeling himself in this vaccine photo.
Yeah.
It seemed to me like the epitome of Will's ego on display in one photo.
Yeah.
It all came together.
His gorgeous, throbbing ego on display.
Okay, buddy. Your words, not mine.
So, for next week, you may be wondering, why haven't we talked about The Me You Can't See, which is Harry and Oprah's series about mental health.
Yeah, we haven't watched it yet.
Yeah, that's the main reason we haven't talked about it. It seems like it's going to be quite hard to talk about Harry's work in the field of mental health going forward without paying proper attention to this series, because from what we've read, it seems he opens up a lot more than I had expected anyway. So we do want to watch it properly before we talk about it, or before we allow that to inform how we talk about him going forward.
We haven't had time, and also it seems like a very heavy watch, so need to be in the right headspace for it, and we just haven't had that opportunity yet, so it might take us a while to get through it. I think, we had a lot of feedback from people the last episode when we talked about Harry's appearance on the Dax Shepard podcast, and I think, we have made it very clear that we aren't in any way qualified to talk about mental health in detail, which is why we always say we'd rather hear from professionals regarding these kinds of projects.
Yeah, we can talk about how things do or don't work for us personally, but we don't feel comfortable saying that any of these kind of initiatives are perfect or above scrutiny by us or other people. And I think it's especially true when it comes to the way mental health is supported in the US. And to us, it seems like there are quite fundamental problems with that, which is where, I would think activism should be focused. But at the same time, as we constantly say, we don't have a thorough understanding of American healthcare. We say it every time we mention it.
Yeah, so we've been thinking about this a lot, and obviously we do take it very seriously, but at the same time, we would like to think this is a sort of fun podcast where we can talk about sort of nonsense things and make it clear when we don't know all the details. So we're sort of trying to figure out how we approach this going forward, if maybe we just don't talk about Harry and Meghan's mental health work in America and just focus on the mental health work in the UK, where we feel a little bit more comfortable discussing.
Yeah, because we have a better understanding of the structures that are in place to help people over here, which we just don't in America.
So yeah, we will try The Me You Can't See, but we might not end up talking about it.
Yeah, that's our homework for this week. And we'll see what else happens with the Royals. If anything else big happens, we'll obviously be talking about that.
Thank you so much for listening to us today, and have a great week.
Bye.
Bye.
I am a free spirit, unfortunately for Sam.